I've never shown this much forehead on the Reading as a Booktube channel. I'm not loving it, but like, I'm growing my hair out, so we have to try new things. Hi, it is February 8th today. I am 2 months and 1 day on tea. I did not have time yesterday. I'm sorry, it annoys the shit out of me that I'm not exactly 2 months on tea right now. But I promise that my voice was not that different yesterday, nor was anything else for that matter. This month, I want to talk to you guys about all the books that I read, which is honestly not that many, all the books that I bought, which is quite a lot, and I want to talk about some movies that I've seen. Last year I had a couple of months where I tried to talk about every single movie that I saw, but the thing is, I don't like talking about movies that I didn't like. Like, I just can't be bothered. I don't like movies that much. I only like some movies that much. So I'm only going to talk about the ones that I really, really loved. Well, anyway, I'm gonna have to invent a new hair flip. Let's start with the books I read. I only have one of them in physical. Wait, that's not true. I'm lying. Fuck. Wait. I have 2 physical copies of books that I read. The rest were from the library and some audiobooks. We'll get to it. The first book I read since January 7th was Mother Island by Edna O'Brien, because I went to Dublin to see my friend Sally. I wanted to read a book about Ireland. I found that one in a free little library at one point. It was very heavy on like the wonderful language, so much so that it was kind of hard for me to follow and understand what was going on at any given moment, but somehow it still managed to paint a proper portrait of Ireland and the Irish people, at least like to the extent that I wanted before my trip. I realized I didn't really actually like know anything about Ireland, so it was nice to learn some stuff before I went. The next book I read was I Will Die in a Foreign Land by Kalani Pickard. Beautiful, stunning cover, by the way. That's kind of why I was attracted to it. It's about Ukraine and the protests that were happening in Kiev in 2014 and all the police brutality that happened surrounding that, and it follows 4 different characters grappling with that. When I read this book, I realized that I read so much literary fiction that I forgot what normal fiction was like. It's like this. You have a bunch of characters, they are put into this well-rounded story, and the prose is just very straight on and not that great, which is why I didn't really like this book that much. It did what it came to do though. Like, it needs to be said that the author is an American. She's not Ukrainian at all whatsoever, but she was just interested in the topic, and she decided to do a lot of research into Ukrainian history and the things that happened in 2014 and the things that are happening now, and decided to write a story about that. I do respect the hustle because you can tell that she put a lot of research into it. She also went to Ukraine to actually like properly describe the country and the people. I do think people should be allowed to write things like that, obviously, if they do their research, and she did. However, I think I was just like missing that personal link, or at least the emotional insight or something. I don't know. There was something lacking there. And I think it also might have been because there was 4 characters in there. I think it would have been better if she had just picked one and focused on that one, fleshing out that one, because I also felt like the characters were just names to me and I didn't really care for any of them, and it just didn't really work for me. I think at the end of the day, we just have to accept that some books are not for us, and that's fine. Moving on, the next book I read from the library was A Lie I Told You. No, A Lie Someone Told You About Yourself. I saw this book in the library before, and I was interested in it before. It was the cover that did it. I don't know, Dandelions fun. I don't know why I was attracted to it, but I read on the back of it that it was about a man grappling with an abortion in the face of having a new child and finding out that that child has autism. And when I read that, I was like, man, opinions, abortion, child with autism. I was like, I feel like that book is going to make me angry. So I put it back, and then the next time I went to the library, I picked it up again because I was interested again. I think it was also because I didn't finish Kiddush for an Unborn Child, as you may have seen in my last video, and I still wanted like a father's perspective on, I don't know, children, I guess, or not having children. So I did pick it up after all, and I was like, you know what, if it makes me angry, I'm just gonna DNF. It's not a big deal. I can just bring it back to the library. It's nothing to lose. So I did pick it up, and it was the complete opposite of what I had expected. It didn't make me angry at all. It was actually really great. The abortion happens between him and his wife, who is still his wife, for medical reasons, because the child might have been severely disabled. And this to me was very interesting because I also read Stillborn last month, and that was my favorite book of last month. That was very much about, oh my god, there's cops in my neighbor's house. Oh no, it's not cops. Why are they wearing that? I wish it was cops. That would have been much more fun for me to witness personally. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, last month I read Stillborn, which was very much about also being pregnant with a child that might be severely disabled, only deciding to keep it. So this was like an opposite perspective of that. And those were two very interesting books to read, like in juxtaposition to each other, and think of it from both ways. Because Stillborn made me think a lot about what it means to want a child so bad that you would, well, if you read the book, you will understand the kind of things that that book makes you think about. Then at that point, I was still like wary of where the autistic child thing was going to go, because I was like, there must be a catch somewhere. Like now they're going to see that the autistic child is fine, and like they could have just kept the other disabled child and it would have been fine also. But it wasn't like that at all. The way that he wrote about that child was so sweet and so endearing, and I really enjoyed that. I thought that was kind of fresh. I was expecting the worst, and it wasn't bad at all. It was great. And throughout the entire book, he's thinking about abortion a lot. He's thinking about it in a very progressive and left-wing way. He does a lot of reading on it. He does a lot of research into it. He goes to a clinic to volunteer there and help people who are also having abortions for non-medical reasons. It was just a reflection on choices that we make and whether or not we should feel ashamed about those choices. And if we do, like, how do we cope with that and that kind of thing. And I thought it was a really interesting book. I'm seeing now that I forgot to read that book. Maybe I did that because it was a very personal story. It is a memoir-ish kind of thing. I think it's autofiction. It reminded me in a lot of ways of The Department of Speculation, one of my favorite books of last year. It had a lot going for it. I honestly couldn't believe that a book written by a man did it for me that well. And about these topics too. Incredible. Then the next book I read, I actually have De Avonden by Gerard Reven, The Evenings. It's been translated quite recently, which is why there is a fairly new version of this out. This is a Dutch classic about a guy. He's not really doing anything. That's kind of the point of the book. It's about the last week of the year and the complete lack of purpose in this guy's life. And this guy is a fucking menace. He is telling all his friends that they're going bald, stirring up shit between his parents. He's gaslighting his deaf dad about like what he just said to him, and he's being a menace, but weirdly it's kind of endearing and kind of cute. And like his tone is very cute in a way. He's kind of funny. But I do think that it went on for a little bit too long, because in the beginning it was funny that he was telling all of his friends that they were going bald, but then in the end it was like, we get it now. Because this book, it doesn't look that big, but it's actually it's almost 300 pages. This is compared to The Catcher in the Rye, and I can definitely see the similarities. It is very different. There's no sex in here at all, which is actually kind of strange for a Dutch classic. This is about a guy who is bored to tears, and he doesn't masturbate once. But I do appreciate that, because I don't think I would have wanted to read that. Anyway, one thing I will say about this book that I thought was really cool, the guy in this book, he is 24 years old and he's still living with his parents. He doesn't have a girlfriend. He does have a job, but he doesn't really have like a sense of where he's going in life. He feels like a failure very much. And the way that it's also about the last week of the year, which also kind of feels like that. There's like this lack of purpose to those days. And then it's also set and written in the latter half of the 40s, so like right after World War II, which probably also had that same kind of sense of like coming out of this like really intense time, adolescence and the whole year and the war, and then going on to what is next and not really knowing what is next. And I could really sense that, the lack of purpose. I just thought that the comparison between those two things, it's very subtle. It's like not really the theme of the book. It's like not really explained it. I actually didn't see anyone else say this in any reviews or something, but that's what I got out of it. And I thought that was really cool. I did rate it quite high. I think 4 stars. I don't know. But yeah, it has been translated and apparently the translation is good. So if you're interested in Dutch classics, Gerard Reven is a gay man. The book isn't gay because he wrote it in the 40s, but yeah, he's one of the greatest Dutch writers that ever lived. I'd never read anything by him before, but I don't know, maybe I will again. It didn't disappoint me, so that's good. The next book I read was The Stranger by Albert Camus. I have been looking for this book physically forever. I'm always trying to get it secondhand because I feel like it's a book that you should be able to get secondhand very easily, but apparently it's not. Anyway, so I listened to it at the gym because it was very short. This one was a bit underwhelming to me. Disappointing, maybe even, because I was attracted to this book for the sole reason that the opening line is a fucking banger. Like, you know the opening line, right? Mother has died today, or maybe yesterday. That's a good fucking opening sentence. That always made me like really curious about like why he doesn't seem to care enough. Also, I always expected him to be much younger than he actually was. Anyway, this might be a spoiler, but if you don't know, but you have also always been intrigued by that opening sentence, the reason he doesn't know whether his mother died today or yesterday is because the telegraph that he gets doesn't have that information in it. It's not like he doesn't care. It's just that he doesn't know. I don't know. I was expecting something different from it. Then it kind of turned into like this Kafkaesque trial thing, only he did actually commit murder. So it was like not, I wasn't really rooting for him at all. I just wanted to see him like, pay for his crimes. There was an interesting discussion going on about whether or not he should be judged by the fact that he didn't cry at his mother's funeral, which I think would have been an interesting discussion if he hadn't actually committed murder. Because, like, he did it and they can prove it. I just didn't care. I think this might have been an interesting take on a sociopath in the 1940s, 60s, when was this written? Around that time. But now I feel like, I don't know, I just would have liked a more, like, nuanced take. I don't know. It was kind of disappointing to me, especially because it was one that I have been looking forward to for a long time. And it just wasn't. It just wasn't. I can't say anything about the prose, though, because I listened to it in Dutch. And moving on. Next book I listened to was The Call of the Wild by Jack London, which I wanted to read because it's mentioned in The Word for Woman is Wilderness, because the girl in the Word for Woman of Wilderness, the book with all the W's, she's also compelled by The Call of the Wild, and so she talks about that book and the other book, White Fang, in which a dog is actually called into domesticity. I thought I was going to read them both, but now I've read this one and I didn't really like it, so I'm probably not going to read that one. Anyway, I was kind of hoping that this book was just going to be a cute story about a dog being called to the wild and joining a pack of wolves. However, it was mostly about dogs being treated horrendously and trying to kill each other. It was very violent, very gruesome, and I didn't like that. I just wanted a cute book about dogs. This was not that. The next book I read was the first book I read for uni. We're back at it. It was... I can never say this title. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. This book was excellent. Well, the author has won the Nobel Prize in Literature. I really like this one. I've also seen this one around a lot, and I had a lot of expectations for it based on the title, and it was not what I expected at all, but it was so much better, because this is the kind of thing that I've been desperately wanting to read. It's about like raw nature and yeah, well, it's about raw nature and wild animals and wild places. It's basically about a woman, an older woman, who lives alone in the woods somewhere in Poland, in a place where it gets really, really fucking cold in winter. So most of her neighbors leave the area in the winter months, and she and two of her neighbors stay behind alone, and she kind of takes care of all the other people's houses. And it's all fun and games until people start dying. And she swears that it's the animals taking revenge on the people. I was rooting for her. She was so right. She was such a character because she was like the crazy old lady, and she was a crazy old lady, but also she was very interesting. She's very into astrology, so she talks about astrology a lot and like in depth, very much in depth. I learned a lot about astrology from this book. She has very strong convictions about wild animals and nature and how humans should be interacting with those things and should be protecting those things and living in harmony with them rather than shooting them for fun, most of which I agreed with so much, and I really liked her, and I did think she was kind of unhinged and a bit of a crazy old lady, but I loved her. So I really like this book. I have another book by Olga Tokarczuk, Flights. I haven't read that, you can't see it, but it's there, trust me. I really liked her writing too. It was really good. It felt very beautiful, and like the thoughts she was putting down onto paper were just excellent. There was a lot about this that I really, really liked. Also, it's just a quote by William Blake. There's a lot of quotes by Blake in this book, which is cool. Anyway, very interesting book, very cool. Deserves the hype. Those were all the books I read before the 7th. I've also been reading another Spanish book for children. It's truly not that interesting. And I'm also reading Unmasking Autism. It's gonna take a while. I'm just reading a little bit at a time. Right. book haul. So I went to Dublin. I can't go on trips without buying books because I'm allowed on trips to buy books. I say that like I haven't bought books at home. Anyway, so yeah, I went to a lot of cool bookshops in Dublin. The first one we went to was Books Upstairs. Of course, I wanted to see if they had any Jeanette Winterson. And actually, that bookshop had the most Jeanette Winterson books out of any place I have ever seen. And they had so many that I didn't have yet. Well, 2, but I only picked one. And it's The World and Other Places, which is short stories. I'm intrigued because if you have been around on this channel for a while, you know that I have read 15 of Jeanette Winterson's books now. And the latest 2 I've read have been her latest short story collections, and I didn't like them very much. I don't think short stories are her greatest strength, but this one was written in the 90s, I think, and that was like when she was at her height, writing the most banger-ass novels of her entire career. So this is her first collection of short stories, so I have hope that this one is better than the other 2 that I've read. We're going to see. These are not in order of when I bought them, which kind of annoys me. Oh yeah, there's some books that I bought both in Dublin and in other places, but they are for school, so I'm not going to show them because you're going to see them at some point anyway. I bought this book by Robert Macfarlane about wild places in Britain and Ireland. I decided that I should probably read a little bit more by men this year. I know that's a hot take, but like I barely read anything by men, and I feel like I should get acquainted with them a little bit more and gain a little bit of trust in them. And I also want to read more nonfiction about nature, so this seems like a good place to start. I also found out that he has another book about something that was way more interesting. I don't remember what it was called. I don't even remember what it was about, but if I like this book, I will definitely read that other one because it sounded so interesting. And if his tone sits right with me, then I will try to read that other book. I bought this at the Gutter Bookshop in Dublin. I might bring that to Scotland with me. I bought Slaughterhouse 5 at the Oxfam shop. I think it's brand new. This is also a classic I've been looking for secondhand for a long time, and I finally fucking found it, so that's great. No idea when I'm going to read it, but I'm glad to add it to my collection. What I also found there is a book I've been looking for at the library because I've heard people on here talking about it. The Door by Magda Szabo. Anyway, my library doesn't have it, so simply had to buy it. I've gotten a bit more strict about buying books. Now, when I see a book in a bookstore that I like, I check if my library has it before I buy it to save myself some money and trouble. But yeah, I'm excited to read this one. Those were not all the books I bought in Dublin, but you'll see the rest. I also went to Amsterdam this month and went on a bookshop tour. It was honestly the greatest day I ever spent in Amsterdam. I found so many book places, not even shops. Like, I passed by all of the book markets that were happening on that day. It was incredible. Day well spent. But I went to the Book Exchange first because that's my favorite place in Amsterdam. I go there every time. And what I was looking for specifically this time was a copy of Romeo and Juliet. I read that from the library, and I read that by having Sally explaining the entire thing to me. And this was the first, and as it is right now, the only Shakespeare that I really, really loved. So I figured I should have a copy. It's actually not secondhand. I think they just have new versions of books that are very popular now. Yeah, one of these days I'm just going to go through this and annotate the things that I really liked about it when I read it last year, if I can remember those bits. But I'll do my best. I'm just glad to own it now. I also, of course, went to the W Shelf, and they did it again. They always pull through at the Book Exchange. I got Tangorak by Jeanette Winterson, which I think is a YA book. This woman, she's just writing anything and everything, and I love that for her. I have no idea what it's about. I think it's like urban fantasy kind of something. Excited to add it to my Jeanette Winterson collection, which is ever growing until one of these days I'm gonna have every single one of them. And then what do? Do I just find a new favorite author? I can't do that. Anyway, but I also found that, and it's weird, I think, that they didn't have this at my library because I feel like this is a very popular book because I've seen it all around here. It's Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin, which I've been excited about. It's an Argentinian writer. And I, for some reason, really like Argentina, even though I have no connection to it at all. Also, did you guys know this was a Netflix film? I had no idea. And then another book I got there is Damage by Josephine Hart, which I mostly picked because this looks cool. I like this edition. And also, I once heard someone talk about Josephine Hart, and it wasn't this book. It was another book. I'm just curious about her writing. Also, the reason I got this, when I opened it, the first thing I read was "My wife is beautiful," For that, I have the evidence of my own eyes and the reaction of those who meet her. Hers is a beauty of pleasing proportions, a felicitous blending of eyes, skin, and hair. She is complete. She was complete before I met her. It was to her picture of life that I contributed my being, and I was happy to do so. That's cute. Anyway, so then I had to buy more school books. I got one off of a website but then I was like, I can't just buy one book from this website. So I went to my list of Jeanette Winterson's favorite books. I guess that's just what I'll do when I have all of Jeanette Winterson's books, is just start on her favorites. Yeah, that makes sense. I went to that list and I checked to see if they had any of the books on there, and they did. This Book Will Save Your Life by A.M. Holmes. I always thought that A.M. Holmes was a man, but she's not. She's a woman, and she's friends with Jeanette Winston. And this is one of Jeanette's favorites. I don't know why. Don't know what it's about. It looks weird. It has donuts on the cover. It's about a man. I'm intrigued by that. And another one of Jeanette Winston's favorite books, The World According to Garp by John Owen, and I am obsessed with this cover. Look at this. It has a frog that's like, I'm obsessed with this cover. Anyway, this is a really big book. No idea what it's about. Written by a man, but a man that Jeanette Winterson trusts. This is part of my journey of reading more men. It is like 600 pages though. 570. That's a commitment that I will not get to for a long time, but maybe in the summer. Do you have anything else to say? Oh yeah, I was going to talk about movies. The first movie I want to talk about was the first movie that really impressed me this month, and it was 20,000 Species of Bees, which is a Spanish movie about a trans child and her mother, mostly. Last year, one of my favorite movies was Limencita, which is a movie about a trans child and his mother. But that one took place in Rome in the 1970s, which is a fantastic aesthetic, in case you were wondering. And also the mother was Penelope Cruz, which was great. But anyway, this movie takes place in the current day. The mother is not Penelope Cruz, but she is an artist and she's really cool. Lately, there have been so many movies about children that are for adults, like After Sun, Zomervacht, which you probably haven't seen if you're not Dutch, and probably even then, but still, Zomervacht was also one of my favorite movies of last year. There's something about movies like that, especially when the child actors are just excellent, and in most of these cases, that is definitely the case, and in this one too, this child was so great. I just thought it was a very sweet movie about a family, really, and a little girl standing up for herself and her mother loving her very much. There were obviously some moments in there that were a little bit painful and a bit harsh on this little child and also on the mother, but it made me feel really good in the end. It was so lovely. It's like a warm hug. And the other movie that I saw that I really, really want to talk about is All of Us Strangers. When I tell you I've never cried so fucking hard in a movie theater, I'm a bit speechless about it now. It has been 2 weeks, I think, since I saw it, and it just still has me in the palm of its hand because it was so... There were moments in it where I was like, oh, this is a little bit predictable, maybe. But then at the end of it, it touched me so deeply. Nothing else mattered. Here's the thing about me. As you see, I never read books by men. I never really care about men. I don't usually gravitate towards queer stuff that is just white, gay men. It's not really my thing. But in this case, they fucking swept me off my feet. This movie was so deeply about the queer experience of loneliness, which is a very distinct kind of loneliness that I don't think straight people can really understand. Also, the way that it was done with the generational divide between them, and then also Adam's conversations with his parents, it just showed the progression of the way that gayness has changed throughout the decades. It was like a very subtle history of queerness, and at the same time it was so much about how queerness is such an integral part of your identity that it naturally becomes part of every experience that you ever have, and everything that ever happens to you kind of snowballs around that. That movie just broke my fucking heart to pieces. I can't wait to go see it again. So fucking good. If you haven't seen it yet, absolutely go fucking see it. So that was that. I didn't really give you guys an update on my testosterone journey. Not that much has changed, really, I feel like. My voice has finally dropped. I think it happened last week. I don't know if you can hear it now because it changes back and forth every day. It's weird, but I think it's finally happening now, as it should after 2 fucking months. I'm also getting a beard. Not sure how I feel about that. Yeah, that was that. And I will see you again next month. And that is a threat. Bye. Sociopathy. Wow, that is one ugly cover.